We're really looking forward to sharing with you our conversation with two winemakers who are currently working in Oregon, Vince Vidrine, who is the head winemaker of Cowhorn Vineyard and Garden, and Morgan Beck, who is the general manager and winemaker at Johan Vineyards. So stay tuned to hear their stories and find out more about them both. Hello, and welcome to the Wine Pair Podcast. I'm Joe, your sommelier of reasonably priced wine, and for this special episode, I am on my own as my wine pairing partner in crime is busy making cakes for her Baby Cakes micro bakery, which, by the way, you can learn more about if you head over to our website, lovebabycakes.com. Now, as a quick orientation to our podcast, what we usually do in each episode is learn about, taste, and review 2 to 3 wines that are reasonably priced, which means under $25 and should be easy to find. However, for this special set of episodes, we interview people who are involved in actually making wine. Because part of what we want to do with our podcast is educate ourselves and you on different aspects of wine knowledge in a fun and entertaining and unstuffy and, heck, maybe even fun and entertaining way, as Decanter Magazine has called our podcast. And that is exactly what we're doing today. And a small plug before we get to the interview with Vince and Morgan. If you like what you're hearing or are interested in hearing our other regular episodes, please subscribe to or follow our podcast so you can hear more, especially since, you're only getting one half of the Wine Pair podcast in this episode anyway. You can also go to our website, thewinepairpodcast.com, to send us a note or subscribe to our newsletter. You can follow us on Instagram at The Wine Pair Podcast, at Blue Sky at The Wine Pair Podcast, and you can send us a note at joe@thewinepairpodcast.com. And if you like what you're hearing, you can even leave us a nice 5-star rating and review. We won't mind a bit. But with that, let's get to the interview with Vince and Morgan. Hi, Vince and Morgan, and welcome to the Wine Pair Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for having us.
You bet. So we are really happy that you're with us today, and we're really excited to learn more about you both. Now, I know that both of you are focused on making biodynamic wines in Oregon, but from different parts of Oregon. So we're really interested in learning more about how you got to where you are today, what drew you to focus on biodynamic wine. So I think we should start right in. We'll jump right in. We'll start with you, Morgan, if that's okay. And what we want to start with is just a little background into you, your family, where you grew up, and maybe if wine played any part in your life growing up, and then we'll dig deeper into some other areas. So, Morgan, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I'm originally from Colorado, so a place that does grow some wine, but not very much of it. I grew up in a family that I'd say wine was around and wine was on the table occasionally, but it was definitely not a huge part of my upbringing. Colorado definitely has a lot of beer, and my dad was really into beer. We homebrewed at our house when we were younger. But I would say really my introduction into wine and kind of beginning of appreciation came from working in hospitality. So I studied finance and international business, nothing to do with winemaking, but my path led me to working up in the mountains in Colorado in hospitality, and we'd ski all day and then work in restaurants at night, and had the opportunity to begin tasting and kind of building my wine knowledge through working at a number of different restaurants and hotels and things. And actually, my passion for skiing took me to South America, and was thinking of skiing down there. And I ended up getting injured and going anyways. And I worked in hospitality down there as well, and had the opportunity to start taking a wine, enology and viticulture certificate program. So that kind of piqued my interest into the actual production of winemaking and growing of grapevines. And from there, I kind of dove straight in with an internship out of that program and fell in love with kind of wine production industry right away. I had the opportunity to work with biodynamic wine during my first harvest, but really dove in my second harvest down in New Zealand. And it had always been, a real interest while working in different cellars, but having the opportunity to find Johan and kind of combine biodynamic wine growing interests with actually the full certification process Johan was the first place that I really dove into it.
Well, that's great. And it sounds like you had a pretty varied background in terms of places that you lived and where you sort of like started to learn about winemaking. So we'll dig into that more in a minute, but let's go to you, Vince, and learn a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks. My background started off in Tacoma, Washington, where my family was, middle, upper class little unit. And I think my parents were really a part of that culture that watched Julia Child and Jacques Pepin, like really got into this food culture that emerged with my parents' generation. And, the learning of wine and learning to appreciate wine was something that was a priority for my parents. And so my brother, who's also a winemaker, we both, I think, just kind of became fascinated with kind of what was at the table. And maybe we were just kind of stoked to like have this little bit of wine for Easter or Christmas or whatever. And that was our first introduction. And that never really kind of left me. And when I was in college, I also started home brewing and started tasting wine, and happened to come across the Intro to Beer, Wine, and Spirits course in the, the big, thick course catalog you'd get, and took the class. And I knew just like within a week of being in that class that I needed to change my major over. And so I hooked it into the enology and viticulture department. Well, it was a major within the food science department at Oregon State University, where I was going to school. And from then on, I was doing harvests locally, and then after graduation, internationally as well, which took me to New Zealand a couple of times, Australia, Napa, France, and always with like smaller wineries with a focus on kind of technical winemaking, I would say. I think the desire to tinker and really try to dial wine quality in at whatever means were available to us was of interest to me. And that was my course for a long time, until I kind of just keep coming back to these wines that were made with less overall manipulation and with more kind of holistic intention. And I've found myself through various events in my own personal life as well, given the opportunity to make the wines here at Cowhorn. And that was exactly where I needed to be. It felt like I landed where I should be making wine because of the farming practices we're using, and also the ethos in the winery as well. And so, yeah, that's how I'm here. And I've been at Cowhorn for the last 2+ years.
Yeah, amazing. You both have kind of a wide background in traveling around to learn the craft. Although I will say, it's interesting, Morgan, your background in terms of like falling into winemaking feels like, at least from the interviews that I've done, it feels a little bit more common. Like Vince's path of going directly from like, although you didn't start out that way in college, but finding it and then going right into it feels a little bit less common to me, at least again, in terms of the winemakers that I've had the privilege to talk to. But want to dig in just a little bit more before we talk about biodynamic and sustainable wine. So Morgan, you mentioned that it was kind of in, I think it was South America, you said, where you started to get interested in wine. So was there something that really drew you in? And was there a mentor or somebody who really sort of showed you the ropes when you were just starting?
Yeah, I mean, I've had the amazing opportunity to have a lot of kind of key mentors throughout the journey into wine and then throughout my wine career. Not having that foundational, 4-year degree like Vince does meant for really, I think I was really drawn to finding people that inspired me and were making wines in the style that I was looking to follow myself. And so my first vintage, I would say, was a total happenstance. I took the job that I could get, and I landed at a custom crush facility, but it was kind of a cool setup that each intern was directly paired with a winemaker. So we acted or operated almost as an assistant. And the gentleman I worked with, his name was Byron Kasugi, and he has his own label called Kasugi Wines, but then also worked and consulted and made the wines for a number of other projects. And he is one of the most thoughtful and intentional winemakers I've ever worked with. He also helped kind of get me in touch with my next 2 opportunities. I believe, or maybe even 3. He helped me get me in touch with the place I worked down in New Zealand. He also helped me get put together with a great opportunity down in Chile when I went to back to South America to work. But I would say he really ignited the flame. And I think it really, your first harvest, whether this is for you or not. And it's not easy work that we do, especially that time of year, but it really clicks for some people. And I think a lot of it has to do with the person who you're working with. So yeah, Byron. And then I would definitely say my first Oregon vintage was with Anna Matzinger up at Archery Summit. And both she and her assistant winemaker at the time, Kate Payne Brown, were 2 female winemakers that I think really taught me the ropes of kind of learning how to use your body in a cellar and how to, like, being a smaller statured female, being able to do all of the things that we need to do with the tools that we have. And that was really inspirational for me at that time. Yeah. And then honestly, the kind of one of the key ones for me was Dan Rinke, the original wine grower of Johan. I started with Johan in 2015, and he was the one who had planted a lot of the vines and converted the entire property to biodynamic and organic farming. And he was by far the biggest mentor for me in the world of biodynamic farming as well as winemaking.
You said one thing, well, you said a lot of things that were interesting, Morgan, but I am curious about one thing because I've actually had the honor to speak to a number of women winemakers. Did you find anything especially challenging as a woman trying to get into the winemaking business?
I don't really feel like I've felt any immediate or intentional roadblocks. I would say that I know specifically there was one point where I got on an interview, and having the name Morgan can definitely go either way in terms of being a male or female. And they were very surprised to find a female on the other side of the phone line. But I did ultimately get that job, which was kind of cool. But no, I definitely think there are less women in our industry, but there are more and more each day. And seeing more women move through management in both winemaking as well as viticulture, specifically here in Oregon, is really cool. A lot of the vines are farmed in this state by women, which is pretty awesome to see so many females in kind of higher level management in viticulture and winemaking. But I don't feel like I've had any direct difficulties getting positions, if that's what you're saying.
Well, that's great. That's inspirational and good to hear that the business is open. Vince, if you don't mind, let's go back to you and talk a little bit about how your path was a little bit straighter into winemaking. But again, I'm assuming there was somebody who showed you the ropes or kind of was a mentor to you. So is there anybody like that in your life?
Well, first, just with Morgan, I didn't know that you were, and I mean this in the best possible way, a ski bum. I am jealous that you were able to fit that in. There are definitely times I wish I had taken a year or 2 or whatever and spent time doing that. But so that's awesome.
It's never too late. Never too late.
I try to fit in the skiing when I can, for sure. My path has also had great mentors. There are ones that are, I think, like going through the list of all the people that impacted me. I'm sure you feel this way, Morgan. It's so hard. There are so many. It's not as, I definitely have one that stands out, but there are many others. One that is one name that like most people probably don't know is like a woman named Darcy Pendergrass, who was the winemaker at Amity Vineyards along with Myron Redford. And Darcy was one of those people when I had just gotten out of school who put so many cool wines in front of me and helped me get positions in New Zealand that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and just really dig into the technical stuff and put me in touch with a lot of great folks. And then when I finally was able to secure like a long-term non-travel position as an assistant winemaker, that was with a man named Robert Britton. And Robert has I guess you'd call it custom crush business in McMinnville in Oregon, but he has his own eponymous brand, Britton Vineyards, which is phenomenal. Makes the wine for Winderley Wine Company, also biodynamic. And I spent 5 good years with him, and we did a whole lot in that time. And I owe a whole lot of gratitude. I have a whole lot of gratitude and owe so much to him. And again, like the history and like the technical part of it was an important part of my life. And then I think after that, mostly I think is like even having a few jobs in between Britain and here, I think the foundation was kind of set. And, now you kind of reach a point, I'm sure Morgan agrees with me, you reach a point where you're like, like I am who I am and I'm making wines in a way that I'm going to make wines. And I have to try to determine what I want to change and what I want to keep. And there's a constant reevaluation and creative piece that you want to bring forth and taking all these new techniques you might learn and to changing goals and just the whole process, the creative process. And now I'm always looking to have those like meaningful conversations with other winemakers or wine professionals or even just regular people about like, and looking for that new perspective and looking for that, like, okay, now everyone around me, I'm no longer going to have like one mentor. Now, how can everyone around me become that influence in my life?
Well, that's a perfect segue because the next thing I wanted to ask is, what do you think defines you? So we'll stick with you, Vince. What defines you as a winemaker, at least today? Maybe it'll be different tomorrow. It's been different, I'm sure, as you've been making wine, but what defines you as a winemaker? And maybe also weave in there the focus on biodynamic wines and how that fits into, at least today, how you want to make wines.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that still, through all these years, I think the like defining part of the kinds of wine I want to make are really terroir driven. They're really driven by what the vines can offer. And one of the things that's become most important to me is working with estate vineyards where Morgan's able to really be a part of the wine growing part and not just being fully reactive in the cellar, but really driving the winemaking ahead of harvest day. And I think that for those of us who are part of it, it's a great gift because I think we're able to go deeper, and affect quality from like the real essence of the wine, which is, the vines themselves. And so being a part of that, being a part of the farming process. But I would say the evolving part is kind of coming into the cellar and really doing much less. And really like, that's part of the thing that really has me excited now is seeing what can be done with no added enological tools or, with far less sulfur, with only the native microflora that's available to us in the vineyard and the winery. And, really letting those wines develop who they are in the cellar during élevage, putting them together and kind of seeing where they go. And I still think that like one thing that I always want to achieve is like elegance, like aromatic and textural, like finesse, but not by doing it artificially, not by, like breaking out all the little tricks and tools that winemakers have at their disposal, but by doing it a little more like proactively in the vineyard and also, some of the fundamentals of extraction and, like getting the wine from the juice, from the skins into the juice and that actual process and not rushing things and spending time with every single fermenter and barrel. And I'm sure all these things are like kind of a trope, but like, I really do believe that they are critical to the kind of wines that, I want to make, that I like to drink, and which hopefully are wines that like become well recognized for where we're growing them.
I've asked this question of other winemakers before, and I'm curious how you would answer this, and maybe this has changed, but now as a winemaker, and maybe some of it has to do with the fact that you're estate growing, but do you feel like you spend more time with the vines and the grapes or the juice when you're making the wine, or is it both?
I would love to think that I've become a farmer, but I am not. I am a winemaker, and I know it because when I walk into the winery during harvest, like that's when that like focus, just like that's where my strength is. And I'm still looking for a mentor in the vineyard. I don't know. We have a great team here. We have Jesus, who's been with the farm for the past like 12 years. We actually have Morgan's vineyard manager at Johan, Nathan Wood, who is amazing, and he provides some really wonderful help whenever we need it. And so there's a synergy that we have that helps me along. But I'm not going to pretend like I am from the vineyard. I'm still learning that part of it.
Well, thanks for the honesty. Morgan, to you, similar question. How do you define yourself maybe today as a winemaker versus, what you used to be? What makes your wine special? And again, how do you weave in sort of biodynamic into the wines you want to make?
Well, I would say a lot of what Vince mentioned really resonated with me. And I think it shows a lot that we've both kind of landed at these really incredible projects that we get to work with. I agree that working with an estate property is kind of coming through my career and working with a number of different sites at other wineries, and then working on the farming side. I worked in vineyard management for a few years and farm the grapes all season and then drop them off at the doorstep of a winery and not know I'd taste the wine later, but not really be a part of what they were going to become. So being able to work through the full process and having the opportunity to work with such incredible sites and be present throughout the entire growing season to make those potential creative changes that we'd like to explore in the winery, but make those out in the vineyard, I think has really been a fulfilling part of seeing one site over a long time. I think the biggest thing with biodynamic winemaking specifically, and if you read any of the Steiner work, you'll learn that presence and intention is a huge part of what he talks about. And I think at this point, like what defines me as a winemaker, what I really feel like my style is really just being a guide to kind of translate what that year in this special vineyard gave us. And at this point, we've kind of figured out, I would say we feel pretty comfortable in farming Pinot Noir on the Johan Vineyards site. We have 14 different varieties, and a lot of those are still, I would say, kind of new to the Willamette Valley and definitely newer to our site. Even if it's been 5 years, we're still kind of just figuring out what their, expression is here and how to best nurture that most pure expression of that variety through the winemaking process. And I think that that's really the definition of biodynamic wine, is to be listening to what the vineyard wants to give you and what it has produced for the season, and not try to edit or push that wine to be something that it is not. And Vince kind of mentioned extraction and phenolics and different wine chemistry pieces of the puzzle. But I think to be able to look at that and listen and allow it to kind of come through the winery, I like to think of it as a train. That train is on a track, and as long as we can kind of keep it on the track, the site will really provide what we need for the season. I don't know if that makes sense, but
totally makes sense. I feel like winemakers that I talk to who think about things sustainably or who just are estate driven, they really do talk a lot about just sort of like see where the grapes take you. So that totally makes sense. And actually, another question I would like to ask you, Morgan, because I've asked this of some winemakers as well, and maybe this, again, has changed over time, but when you think about when you're making wine, do you lean more towards the art or the science of winemaking, or both, or neither?
I would say I really enjoy functioning right at the middle of where art intersects science. And I think there are a lot of lower manipulation or natural winemakers who do not use or look at wine chemistry. We run a juice panel on every single fermentation that's coming in our door to know what our nutrients look like coming into the fermentation picture, and where our acids are and how much sugar we have and how all of those pieces play. We are not looking to edit those, but I like to have all of the information there just to be able to be aware of, some of the areas that we might need to be present or look for things that could kind of bend in a weird direction. So I do like fully knowing the science and the chemistry, and I love learning about vine physiology and all of the different like hormones and shifts and things that happen in the vineyard. Again, we're not looking to change those, but just to have all the information really helps us, I think, be better winemakers. And then I think the art side, the creative process is definitely blending. I mean, blending is where we get to take all of these pieces and parts and put them together and to make something beautiful that we're most excited about. And hopefully that's what other people find resonates with them as well. So I'd say the intersect of art and science is kind of where I like to operate.
Well, let's stick with you, Morgan. I'm going to keep you on the spot for just a minute here because I do want to talk a little bit about, some of the wines that you're making, maybe some latest releases and what you're excited about. As I was doing some research, Johan, as you said, focusing on a lot of Burgundy varietals, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Melon, but also some varietals that, frankly, I was like, I'm not even sure I know what that is, like Ribolla, Gialla, and Savagnin. So curious about anything that you're really excited about.
Yeah, I will say Pinot Noir is what brought me to Oregon, and Pinot Noir is what really has pushed my winemaking path through multiple different countries and regions and things, but still finding that like absolutely perfect barrel of Pinot Noir is what it like takes my breath away in the cellar. But I would say that some of these other varieties and newer winemaking projects that we're working on at Johan are the things that are like igniting the creative juices, if you will. I really, really enjoy the journey right now. I would say I'm still definitely exploring the potential of Sauvignon, the white grape from the Jura. We grafted that into our vineyard after growing up the tiny little plants. We got them from FPS and we're able to grow them up and get them big enough to harvest the budwood, bring them into the vineyard. We got a very small amount from the pots that I had originally grafted in 2019. And then 2020 was really our first kind of somewhat larger vintage of it. Initially, I just kind of applied our Chardonnay winemaking program to it. And now I'm starting to kind of tweak the little bit of skin soaking, a little bit, I put it in a newer barrel this year and also did some stainless fermentation. So I'm excited about the grape. I think it does really well on our site and it has kind of all of the terroir qualities that our Chardonnay does, which Chardonnay is kind of what opened my eye to the Johan property originally. But the Sauvignon is just like, it's more mineral driven, a little bit higher acid, and it's just really, really unique. So I'm excited about that. And then the Blaufränkisch, Austria's like kind of noble red grape. We grafted that into the vineyard in 2010 and have been working with it since 2011. It's a little bit later ripening grape, but it does really well in the cooler vintages, but also is super interesting in warmer vintages. I think it's really well equipped for climate change. It's pretty easy to grow in the vineyard in comparison to Pinot Noir, which is kind of finicky. And also that's why we love it, but Blaufränkisch is super interesting. It has all of the same notes that our Pinot Noir has, just like one deeper dimension in kind of fruit and spice and texture. So yeah, those are some of the exciting things. But again, we make 18 different wines every year. And every year I'm like, we make way too many wines. We should make less. And there's not one that I feel like doesn't fit what we're doing and doesn't excite me. So we keep it going.
It's like having kids. You can't choose your favorite. You got to just stick with them all.
Yes.
No, it's very exciting. And Blaufränkisch is a very underrated wine. I think more people need to know it. Well, Vince, let's go to you and talk about some of the wines and releases that you're excited about. And I saved you I'm having you go second because Cowhorn does Rhône style wines, which I think when people think Oregon, they think Burgundy wines, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, etc. But you're focusing on Rhône. I know you're also in Southern Oregon, so that probably has something to do with it. But was really intrigued by the different types of wines that you're growing and what's kind of exciting you right now.
Well, first, I wanted to just say we are in Southern Oregon, and it is a very different landscape than the Willamette Valley. I spent so much time in the Willamette Valley, and I adore it every time I'm there. A warm blanket of, good memories. And like, I think when you're in the Willamette Valley, it feels like we should settle here, like you understand why the Oregon Trail existed. When you're here in Southern Oregon, it's a little bit more rugged, and it feels a little bit more the wild, like not the Wild West. I mean, I guess you could say that's in terms of varieties and wine and stuff, it still is the Wild West, but just from a habit standpoint, it's very, the trees are much shorter. It's so much drier. There are areas that have wetter soils, but the soils tend to be rockier and sandier, and the geological events surrounding it are very different. The mountains are actually quite different. There's a whole other mountain range down here that doesn't exist, and set of rocks that don't exist up north. And I think it's important for everyone to realize that our vineyard is like 15 miles from California. You continue on the road that goes past the winery, you get up to the Applegate Lake, and then if you keep driving up the Applegate River, you end up in California very quickly. And so it's important to note that we're at about 1,600 feet in elevation. Also, it's important to note that we get a lot more of that heat out of the east than our neighbors, in the Willamette Valley do. So, the highs down here in the summer during July are like, we get a number of 100-degree days. I mean, it's hot, but and the story, the trope, the like hot days, cool nights thing, whatever. But like, there's a reality to that comes into play, and especially in September, because what happens, because we're at this elevation, we really do start to get those cold air like draws down from the mountains that surround us. And they really do surround us here. And we are right on a river bench, basically a mountain river bench. So all that cold air really draws down into the vineyard. And when we come into the vineyard in September, October, I mean, it's like in the 40s, and the highs are still 70s, 80s. We're still like ripening stuff, but we're able to maintain acidity. And so I think it kind of like, I don't think we'll ever point to a place in the Rhône and say, we're Cornas or we're Hermitage or Côte Rôtie or whatever, Saint Joseph, but we're some iteration thereof. We're our own iteration of like some of the climatic things that exist within the Rhône. And part of that too is like our soils, we have cobbles. Like, I mean, not like pure, not like the Chateauneuf, like vineyard of rocks, but like there are areas where the cobbles are just very intense in this vineyard. There are areas where there's lots of gravels. And so we do have, there's a lot of granite in the hills surrounding us. And those, even though the whole vineyard is really like depositional, it's all sedimentary, it's all like, river vineyard. A lot of that is coming from metamorphic rocks. There's sedimentary rocks. So it's kind of cool in that way. So yeah, we're focused in on Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Viognier, Marsanne, and Roussanne. And I would say like the Viognier and the Syrah have been traditionally our flagship wines, the varieties. The Syrah here is like deep purple. It smells of lavender and brush and meat sometimes. All with like, deep huckleberry, blackberry, raspberry, depending on the vintage, how the fruit sways one way or the other, but with like good structure and acid. It's not, I think so many people have tasted Syrah in this country and they think yellowtail Shiraz. They think over extracted, overly ripened Eastern Washington or whatever, and those wines can be cool. I'm not, but like, we're not that. We're more like somewhere in the Northern Rhône, right? We're our version of that. And then the Viognier, so many people also are like, I don't like Viognier. It's oily, the acid drops out. It's too perfumey. It's cloying. It's just kind of too much. Our Viognier tends to still have acid structure and lemon, citrus. It gets into some peach, but it's never like mango and pineapple, it's not, and it's never so perfumey that it's like grandmother or whatever, and I love grandmother. I'm not trying to say anything about her. Anyway, So I'd say those, but like, the thing that I'm really excited about right now is our Grenache. Grenache can be, you taste high profile Chateau Neuf that's driven by Grenache, and it's often 15, 16% alcohol. It feels sweet. Maybe they are sometimes, but they're very intense. And then there's like on the other side of the spectrum, some really cool like Grenaches that people are getting excited about that have, more red fruit and floral, and they're bright and they have a crunchy tannin structure, but like in like a delicious sort of way that isn't, just purely soft, supple, velvet. It's a little bit more crunch. But for those of us who like those wines, like I think our site has the ability to like get phonetically right. There's no bitterness. There's no like weedy, veggie, underripe stuff, but it's just like, it's got this like tautness to it, and it has a brightness and refreshing quality to it at alcohols that are quite a bit lower and acids that are a little bit higher. And I'm just pumped about it. Like these last 3 vintages I've been here, I think like I'm excited about all the wines, but like that one's been really, really cool. The enigma for me still is like Marsanne. I'm still like, it can be cool. It can be really interesting, luscious, really rich wine, but the Marsanne Roussanne, I'm still getting my head around these varieties. And anyway, I'm pumped about all of the Rhône varieties. And again, I should mention too, like I came up from Pinot Noir, and I have that same, and Chardonnay, and I have that same like connection to those wines. And I have to like admit that influences what I value in Rhône wines as well. I also want to just quickly say Morgan's Chardonnay is phenomenal. And I am jealous of I second the Blaufränkisch and the Sauvignon. Like those are just super cool. And I think people should check them out if you haven't tried those varieties. There's so much to like about them.
And I have to say, Vince's Viognier was like, Vince, I so clearly remember the day tasting Viognier with you for the first time in the cellar. And I was like, this tastes like Chardonnay. It has acid. It has, like you said, the grandma perfume thing is like totally toned down. It's not oily. It's extremely food friendly. It's, I think, one of the coolest expressions of, well, definitely one of the best expressions of Viognier I've ever had. So I would highly recommend people to try these wines.
Thanks.
Well, on that note, another perfect segue. Although I will say, first of all, that when my wife and I are doing on the podcast, we're doing wine tasting, we often do bring up this concept of grandma's perfume as they like, oh, I can taste that, and it's not awesome. But you guys don't have it. So anyway, that is the segue that I wanted to bring in is we're inviting you guys to dinner. I don't know if you know this, but when you're in Seattle, you're not far away. You're not far away. And actually, Morgan, our oldest son, lives in Portland. So, we may just have you come over to his apartment, but we're going to have you over for dinner. And we're really excited about all these wines that you're talking about. But we are, Italian-American family, and we have a thing we call a Sunday night dinner, and it's Italian-American food, so it's multi-course. It's always a pasta course, usually red sauce. There's appetizers at the beginning, charcuterie, that kind of stuff. But then, pasta course, and then there's some sort of, usually a meat course, and then dessert. So for each of you, and we'll start with you, Morgan, and you are invited, this is a serious thing. What wines of yours are you bringing to serve with our dinner?
Oh gosh. Well, my ask of what are we having? I mean, it sounds like we're having quite a few different things that we could start.
Variety. It's all about variety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would start with the Sauvignon just because I think that it's really cool and it can play really well with a cheese and charcuterie plate, but also is pretty interesting with a creamy, white sauce and a pasta. The acid cuts it, but also builds this minerality in the middle. And so I think that could be fun with a number of different things in the variety of the courses that we're going to eat on Sunday for dinner. And then one of my favorite food wines, and I think particularly for this time of year, our Skin Contact Pinot Gris is whenever we have a wine dinner and we have the opportunity to kind of build a menu with a chef, I always make sure to get this wine to them in advance because it's so fun to see how creative chefs and, culinary professionals get with this wine. They get to a point normally it's like, we could go so many ways. This could go with the pork in the main course. This could go with dessert. This could, be part of the cheese course. So having the skin contact, Pinot Gris to me is more tannic than Pinot Noir. So there is a lot of texture there, but we make the wine, we kind of do 3 different things during fermentation, and one of which really brings out a lot of aromatics. So it's a really aromatic wine, but super textural. I like to chill it and then kind of let it come up to temperature and play like a red. And then for main course, I would probably bring our Mariafeld Pinot Noir, which Mariafeld is a Swiss clone of Pinot, which has really thick skins and makes like a pretty robust Pinot, but having beautiful acidity. It almost acts like Blaufränkisch, or it to me, it looks nothing like Pinot Noir on the vine, and it tastes to me nothing like Pinot Noir in the glass. So it's one of those fun wines that kind of pushes the boundaries of what people know of Pinot. So those would be my 3. And then I'd probably bring, we have a really fun dessert wine project that we're working on right now, kind of the final steps of it, and we'll be putting to bottle soon. But it is a Macvin, like from the Jura inspired dessert wine project. We have 4 different vintages that we'll be blending together, and that would be fun to share with dessert. So
you're in. It's in. Done.
Yeah.
Consider it done. Yes.
Great.
Good. I can't wait. Okay, Vince, top it if you can.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I'm in. I would love to join you all.
Okay, you're in. You're in.
I think I'd bring our rosé of Grenache. I've been making rosé in so many different ways over the years from Pinot Noir, and it's been just really cool to be able to use to make rosé out of the kind of classic OG rosé. Not necessarily, but depends on where, who you are. But a lot of people kind of come into rosé from Provence, and Grenache is one of the grapes that helps really achieve their wines. And I'm really into making a rosé that's really it's almost, I call it ephemeral. It's like, I know it's not going to last forever. We don't make it to last forever. I want it to have all the raspberry and bright strawberry and floral components, and just really feel pretty and easy and supple, but like finessed. And so we don't make a lot of it. And I pick specific parts of the vineyard that are really, I think, are really good for it. Using bigger vines, bigger clusters, has a little more acid, a little more red fruit. We still sort it. We destem it overnight and then press it. And we just take, the prettiest portions of it. And then the harder press stuff, I find I have a good way to use that in a different purpose. So I really like our rosé, actually. And then for the white, I guess it would kind of depend, I'm always looking for ways to pour our Marsanne Roussanne, and you got to find when the right food is available for Marsanne Roussanne, it sings. And it's just people are like, oh my God, I wouldn't have thought. And so that's a fun one, in the Rhône, they love to pair Marsanne Roussanne with really rich foods, shortbreads or sweetbreads, and, kind of just rich, savory, not so healthy, but kind of fun and special foods for, a celebration, that kind of thing. But we also, our Viognier has that brightness. Our Reserve Viognier, we even lean a little bit more into the intensity of acid and structure. So that would be cool. And then honestly, for a tomato dish, we have a lot of reds I think work. But I think it would be fun to show our GSM. And I just really love how Grenache provides red fruit and a breadth on the palate. It kind of lays out to side. The Syrah builds this dark component and a vertical structure that kind of, those two work together so well, just historically and now. And then the Mourvedre kind of creates this point of interest of, savory, gamey sort of thing. I don't know, so far, the ones we've made in the last couple of years have been like more on the bright side. And I think like it's like very drinkable and bright and, has a structure that I think would really do well with tomato sauces. And then I don't have a dessert wine, unfortunately. I'd have to go into the cellar. Right now, we're not focused on it, so I don't have anything.
Well, what I like about what both of you done is you've turned the table. You told us the wines you're going to bring in now. I have to think about, and I love it. I have to think about like what food we're going to pair with those wines, which is awesome. I love that. I love the challenge. Well, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. I will, after I close off this interview, so for all of our listeners, I'll tell you how to find Vince and Morgan, how to find Cowhorn and Johan Vineyards, and have all that information on our website and in our social. But just want to thank you so much, Morgan and Vince, for the time. Loved the conversation and appreciate your openness.
Thanks so much for having us, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure, really.
You bet. Thanks very much for listening to our interview with Vince and Morgan, and we hope you'll take the time to learn more about them and their winemaking and their wineries. And just in case you were worried about memorizing all the website and email and all that other stuff to get in touch with them or find out more about them, don't worry. You can find out all this information on our website, thewinepairpodcast.com, in our show notes from this episode. So you just look for this episode, you click on it, you scroll down, and you click on the show notes, and there you are. But so you have it. Here again is the information on how to find out more about them. For Vince Vidrine and Cowhorn Vineyard and Garden, the website is www.cowhorn.com. Instagram is Cowhorn Wines. Facebook is Cowhorn Wine, and to email info@cowhornwine.com. For Morgan and Johan Vineyards, the website is www.johanvineyards, that's JOHAN vineyards.com. Instagram is Johan Vineyards. Facebook is also Johan Vineyards, again with a J, Johan, Johan Vineyards, and email is info@johanvineyards.com, again with a J. And again, we hope that you'll reach out to them and find out more and find their wines and buy them and enjoy them. We also hope that you'll subscribe to our podcast, the Wine Pair Podcast, and which is what you're listening to right now, and follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky, and visit our website at thewinepairpodcast.com, where you can reach out to us and sign up for our email newsletter. And you can also reach out to me at joe@thewinepairpodcast.com if you want more information, and we would love to hear from you. But now it's time for us to go, and as we like to say, life is short, so stop drinking shitty wine. Bye-bye.
And the happy ending at the end of our story. Always think too much, always drink too much, always pray too much, always play too much. And when I'm with you too much, I fall in love too much. And when I'm away too much,